Hi, welcome to ITC568. Today I want to talk to you about assignment 1 and give you some guidance as to what to expect from this assignment and what we're expecting from you. So assignment 1 is worth 10%. It's due on the 25th of July and it's around about a 3,000 word assignment, plus or minus 10%, submitted through EAST as is normal. Okay, so there is some essential reading you'll need to do here first, and this is the different privacy principles for the countries we're going to be looking at. So you'll need to look at the Australian privacy principles. You'll need to look at the overview on data protection in Vietnam. Similarly, an overview on data protection in Singapore, the privacy principles for New Zealand, and also the European Union General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. So they are the things you need to have a look at first. You need to allow a little bit of time for you to read these. We'll give you an approach that gives you some ideas of how to approach it. So the scenario. Okay, so those of you who've been with me over the last 12 months or so would have seen DR alarms expanding slowly but surely. Well, it's now starting to expand a little more rapidly. They've had some success with their alarms and monitoring and their IoT products. And so in order to keep up with the increasing demand for their systems, they've now established a manufacturing plant for home alarms in Hanoi in Vietnam. And from there, the completed alarms are shipped to the various different sales offices they have now in Australia, New Zealand, and in Singapore. They're also negotiating with a company in Germany, which is an ICS company, an industrial control systems company, and they will become the sales agent that is hoped, or it's hoped they'll become the sales agent for DR alarms throughout the European Union. Now, another proposal they're looking at is that they were advised recently that it might be a pretty good idea to start providing monitoring services to the end users of their products, particularly the home alarm systems. And the AWS cloud infrastructure actually gives them an advantage because they can do centralized monitoring for many different countries using various different AWS edge locations. So the company realizes that this could give them quite a strategic advantage over competitors, as well as provide lots of useful data about how their different products are used and the types of data they need to collect in order to make further enhancements and make things more useful for people. So it's an interesting area they're kind of looking at. So from our point of view, our task now is to prepare a report that considers the different data protection requirements they have that are required for each of the countries that DR Alarm operates in or is planning to operate in. So your report should cover the following things. What are the major requirements that DR Alarms must meet to satisfy requirements for data protection in Australia? That's the first one. Then the second question, how do the requirements for data protection differ between Australia and Vietnam? And do these differences, if there are any, affect the manufacture of the home alarm systems? And so you'll look at the Australian system first, then Vietnam, and compare. The third question is to look at the differences between the Australian data protection requirements and those in Singapore, New Zealand, and Germany as a member of the EU. So you'll need to analyse that and discuss the differences that look there. Then finally, you'll make some recommendations, along with your reasoning for those recommendations, on how DR alarms should proceed with data protection implementation to meet the different requirements they've got for manufacturing on the various sales locations. Okay, so to present this, you've got to provide a written report with these headings: data protection requirements in Australia, data protection requirements in Vietnam, data protection in different sales areas, and recommendations for data protection implementation. So again, as I said, a guide here is that you should do around about 3,000 words plus or minus 10%. You need to reference using the APA 7th edition format. That's essential. However, your reports should not use any templates developed by a government department or agency, nor should it refer to either the Australian Government Information Security Manual or Protective Security Policy Framework. Great documents that they are not terribly applicable to a private company at this time. Okay, so they are to be left out. So how do we go around this? So firstly, we're not being asked for legal opinion, so there's no need to panic around the fact that you've got to start to read privacy principles, data protection requirements, legislation, etc. So here is an approach I'd suggest to you. Start with the Australian privacy system. This is your baseline. So this gives you that starting point. Read through the Australian privacy principles, have a look at them, understand how they're going to affect DR alarms, what are the different things that DR alarms needs to do in order to ensure that the Australian privacy principles are implemented. Then once you've got that, you can then start to move to the other countries. And so you would then look, for example, at Vietnam. It's question 2. So then are these requirements different? Are they more stringent, less stringent? How will that country's requirements affect DR alarms plans? So what I would suggest here is that you make up a table and you start to list all the differing privacy requirements, and you so headed for each column: Australia, Vietnam, New Zealand, Singapore, EU, and away you go. And then you can start to compare things. So once you've done that, you can then write up and answer questions 1, 2, and 3. You've got all your data; it's there in a table for you, so you can discuss it quite simply. Your final step then is to look at the recommendations you're going to make to DR alarms on what are the ways that they should start to implement data protection. So the hints I would give you on this is to, again, make sure that you really carefully read the case study information. There are bits there that need to be considered in view of risk, but that's all the hint that I'll give you on that. Okay. Also, make sure you read the marking criteria to see what we're looking for in each question, because that will also give you some ideas on how to approach it. Make notes. You can't do this one from memory, right? Make notes. It's so much easier to compare each different country's requirements when you've got organised notes. And that's why I suggested to you that a table may well be a really good approach here. A spreadsheet could be a good example to put that together. Think about the various differences in requirements. Should you adopt a possible more stringent requirement that covers all the locations, or should you adopt requirements that fit each different location so that they may be different? Have a think about that. There's arguments for and against. One word of advice: don't get too hung up on the word count. The idea of the word count is to give you an area or a size of report that you need to commit to. Right? We're looking for clarity and brevity in the report, but also logic. You've got to, we can certainly give us clarity and brevity, but it should not be at the expense of logical thinking and expression. So make sure you do that. Don't forget to reference. You might try practicing the cite as you write option in your reference manager before you start to get too involved in the assignment, because it will really be your friend. Finally, as we can see here, DR alarms is expanding now, and it's expanding rapidly, but that brings its own problems. And this is another really interesting example of a real-world problem. A lot of companies have this idea of world domination. It's been the aim and the bane of many companies over the years, and sometimes seen some really great successes and as well as some spectacular failures. From the way we look at this assignment puts you straight into a problem that has considerable privacy and security issues that you have to consider, particularly in the cloud ecosystem, because you're now operating globally. So this is where you now start to think about some of these issues and how you need to approach them. And because it's operating globally, you now have a number of different locations you have to consider, and the way in which the local situation, the local laws apply. So it's an interesting assignment. I think you'll enjoy it. But as I said, don't get too hung up on the legal practicalities. We want to get a first cut that from you. I mean, in real life, once you've made your recommendations, they would be passed on to the legal guys to give their opinion before a final decision is made. So you're giving your opinion based on your reading and the way you see the requirements that you've been given to work with. I hope you enjoy it. It's a really interesting one, and good luck.